Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Bankroll Burners, the podcast for poker players who can't stop getting it in bad. I'm Mike,
And I'm Josh.
and we are here, as always, bringing you some recently played poker hands. I am in an unusual spot. I am sitting behind the tiki bar in my house. You can see the sign. Uh, Very tropical. How are you today, Josh?
I'm a little sick. The cold in New England is hitting us all hard. I'm sure that you identify with that.
Yeah, it's really harsh in Florida as well.
Uh,
Um,
but
well,
got a couple good sessions in this weekend. I really tried to play good solid poker and saw some reasonable results and got quite a few fun hands.
fantastic. Yeah, I have not been able to play as much lately, but I do have some exciting hands to bring to our viewers as always so they can marvel at our terrible play as everyone enjoys doing. I feel like if I were you, viewer, I would just watch us to make myself feel better. So,
I'd say the main draw to this channel is watching us punt.
for sure. Well, speaking of, um, I have two hands today. One that I played badly and one that I played really, really badly. So I'm going to start with the bad one. Um,
Okay, and what's this game? Is this back to 2-2 best bet jacks?
no, actually, this is a hand from an online session in our online home game. So it's not traditional online. We're not bringing you guys some blitz, 10 NL blitz nonsense. This is a home game, really. Like, it's an online room, but people are there to have fun. They splash around. It feels much more like a live game. So
There are some
uh,
characters for sure, not like you're gonna run into on any sort of online platform.
yeah, absolutely. So this is from our online home game, and the villain in this hand I think I've played with before. I don't really remember much about them particularly, other than that I think they're a little splashier than perhaps the average player, although maybe not for this game. Maybe for
Sure.
this game they're about average.
So is this a 25 cent, 50 cent game then?
This is a 25 cent, 50 cent game, and we're gonna start this hand off with the main villain is we're gonna be $58 effective.
Okay.
So a little over 100 big blinds.
Nice.
And I did run this hand through a solver, so we will have a little bit of a solver output for you in a minute here. But just to start with pre-flop, we're in the big blind in this hand, and we're sitting with 6 of diamonds, 7 of diamonds. And this hand's going to start off with, it's actually a 6-handed table, which is pretty nice. And this hand's going to start off with the hijack, who is second to act, and the main villain is going to open it up to $1.50, which is a standard open 3x.
Okay.
And it's going to fold all the way around to the small blind, who just calls. And my read on the small blind is actually they're fairly competent, so I was sort of surprised by this. But
Small on the walls. Okay.
yeah, so I was kind of like, huh, that's interesting.
Well, it is weird because I've been reading up on some charts on like GTO Wizard because those are free. You can get free pre-flop charts, and there is actually it does allow kind of some flatting, some like segments of hands, which is kind of interesting.
I think that's fair. I think in this game, which is a very aggressive game full of a lot of lags, I don't really like flatting ever in the small blind. I think
Yeah.
because you're going to get yourself in a lot of bad situations. Speaking of aggressive play, I go ahead and bump this one up to 750.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really like calling here. We're going to be in the middle with our suited connector. It's going to be pretty hard to realize our equity. If we're from the middle, I'd rather have the betting lead here. I think in a cash game, I might fold this, but at this table, I think we need to be given a little bit of action. So if we're going to give some action, we're going to raise this up. I don't like calling here.
Yeah, I don't think. I mean, I'd rather call than fold. I think even in the
Yeah.
middle, because like you are getting a good price, especially in a game like this that's unraked. You are going to be getting like an actual good price.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's fine to call just because you do have pretty good good odds. You just need to be, of course, aware that there are going to be flops where you have some equity and you're going to need to fold just based on the action, which of course sucks, but there are going to be other flops where this hand can definitely make some pretty nutted hands. So
That's true. I guess like I'd prefer to do some flatting with maybe a hand like Jack 9 suited or Queen 10 suited.
Or even Ace X suited is fine too.
Oh, sure, absolutely. But just a hand where we can make top pair and like have it matter a little bit.
Yeah.
Versus like here, we're never going to make top pair. Even if we do, it's going to be awkward. We're going to have to fold middle pair a lot.
Yeah.
If it goes bet call, we just fold. So it's.
I certainly am always down to squeeze some suited connectors as well, especially in a game where you want to kind of have play a higher percentage of hands. Your side, 5x is totally fine. I've been trying to go a little bit bigger on 3-bets recently, but it's marginal.
Yeah, absolutely. So
it's a subtle thing.
It's a subtle thing Well, so speaking of Bart Hansen, you were on his show. Everyone should go check that out. That was pretty fun.
I was, yeah, not on a YouTube video, but on the live call-in, which was a lot of fun.
Yeah, hopefully, he'll make a video out of it. It'll be pretty funny.
It was quite funny. I will say one thing. My hand, of course, was from Encore Boston Harbor. It was a hand we went over on this podcast where I had pocket queens and made a hero call. And the last call of the call-in show was a guy who just got on to talk with Bart once again about how awful Encore Boston Harbor is.
It's fair.
Which is just I just thought it was funny. But he's actually getting a lot of calls from there, and he plays there like reasonably often nowadays. So
fair enough. So all right, back to this hand. So
you raised to 750 and
hijack calls and small blind folds.
Okay, awesome. Kind of the expected outcome. It would be super weird if you think that small blind is a pretty decent player for them to ever double flat.
Yeah, I would be pretty surprised. So the flop is 10 of spades, 3 of clubs, deuce of hearts, and of course we've got about 1650 in the middle.
Sorry, say that one more time. 10 of spades.
10 of spades, 3 of clubs, deuce of hearts.
Okay.
So we flop nothing.
Total.
Some backdoor straight draws. And I do want to pull up, if you don't mind, the solver output, because I did promise folks this. This is just going to be a one-street solver output, and you'll see why in a minute.
Yep, it's up
this
on
is
the
actually,
screen.
I was very surprised by the solver output on this flop. Let me know when you
it's up there, and I'm looking at it now. So as to our viewers, the green boxes typically mean check on these solver outputs. So you can see that the solver wants us to check quite a lot, which is a little bit surprising to me as well.
Yeah, we're checking 70% of our range here, which is really high.
Now, one thing, of course, that we really like about the solver that we use is that one thing that probably many solvers probably have. But did you look at what the equities are between the two of you?
You mean in terms of overall equity or different,
overall equity? Because I know, that's often one reason when you see that you check more than maybe you think you should is because you actually have not that much equity versus the in position player's range.
Yeah, so in this particular spot, we are pretty close in equity. We are slightly unfavored, but only slightly. It's like 46, 54.
That's pretty bad. That's that's actually pretty. I would say that's pretty unfavored for a 3-bet pot.
Yeah, fair enough. And
then being out of position as well pushes it even more towards a check. But if we have only a 46% equity with all, and of course that means all of our hands in our range versus all of our opponent's hands in their range. I mean that makes a lot of sense why the solver wants to check a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point. And the other thing too is we do have an ever so slight nut advantage on this board with about 11% of our hands being in the top 25th percentile of equities and only about 9% of our opponent's hands. So it's quite slight, and notably very few. Neither of us really has a lot of strong hands. This is a very kind of mid-heavy. Both of us will just have a lot of hands with kind of middling equity.
Yeah, and I wonder, and I don't know enough to say for sure, but I wonder if maybe that kind of lends itself to being part of why we check is because we are out of position. And it's just so hard to play multiple streets from out of position with a middling hand, whereas our opponent kind of is able to leverage position a lot better. If we see bet small here and get called, you're gonna have to do a lot of checking on the turn. and then your opponent kind of can start firing, and you're just put into an awful spot with like so many hands.
Absolutely. And you all can see on the solver output pretty much, this yellow sizing is the main sizing being used when we do bet. That's about a third pot sizing. And you can see that the bluffs that are being favored are really a lot of straight draws, basically, and then just sort of some random suited broadways with backdoors for the most part.
Right.
Is what the bluffs consist of. It's sort of interesting to see the solver also betting these like bottom pair type hands, probably starting to bluff already with those. Pretty interesting as well.
Well, and that's nice too when like our opponent's nutted hands, they might have some pocket threes or pocket deuces.
Mm-hmm.
So having a three or a deuce is nice. Okay, so I assume that the reason this is going to be a one street solver output is because you decide to bet and completely ignore the solver's recommendation.
Yes. Well, I didn't have the solver on hand.
Good.
Which is a good thing. But I did go ahead and bet. I bet $5.50 for a third pot, which is, as you can see, an absolute punt of equity. But we did do that, and we get a call from Dylan.
Okay.
Now, I was thinking, for the record, that I would be betting this flop a lot. So it shows you what I know.
Okay.
But anyway, so I think one thing to note is because of the configuration pre-flop, we are over incentivized to squeeze. And so our range might actually be weaker than otherwise would if this were just a three bet pot. I don't know if this particular solver is using like proper ranges there, but it's just something to think about.
Okay, good.
At any rate, it does go bet call, and the turn rolls off the deuce of diamonds. So it pairs the bottom card, and it rainbows the board.
Pretty big brick.
Yeah, I would say so. Unless, of course, we were starting one of those king deuce suited bluffs that the solver seems to be advising. But so, what do you think here, Josh?
Well, I think that we've put ourselves in a pretty tough spot. Because like our hand doesn't really have any particularly nice bluffing capabilities. In fact, I'd say, I don't know. Like it's weird because I feel like our opponent can just continue with a lot of hands, and I feel like the types of hands we want them to have, if we want them to fold at this point, are hands like pocket sixes and pocket sevens. So maybe that's a reason for starting the bluffs more with like the suited broadways, is because like those hands, like, if you had like king jack of spades or something, and you bet and got called on the flop and the turn rolls off a deuce, your opponent might call you on the flop with some Broadway cards, but they'll probably fold the turn. But they also might start folding the turn or the river with like a hand, kind of a middling pocket pair below the 10. So, now we're kind of in a weird spot where I don't know that our hand is a great bluff candidate.
No, I think that's a good point. It is interesting to note that when we do bet flop, the solver is continuing about 40% of the time on this brick turn card. So it is doing a decent amount of continuing, mostly with those sort of, straight draws and suited broadways, not certainly with this hand that it wasn't even betting on the flop. My thought in the moment was that I wouldn't have a lot of good bluffs on this board. And I think that is probably still true, but we just have bad bluffs. And so the solver just wants to use sort of these suited broadways as bad bluffs instead of this particular hand, which I think probably you're hitting the nail on the head, that we really want our opponents to have pocket sixes and pocket sevens and pocket eights, whatever. Like these sorts of, just like we're kind of blocking the exact hands we want our opponents to have. So,
but it is a weird
broadways blocks their overpairs, which is really important.
Yeah, that's true. So yeah, of course I can fault you, but I won't fault you for. It's always hard to find bluffs on like rainbow boards, and so finding any at all is a nice win. But finding the wrong ones.
Let me tell you the ending here. It's going to be a great win.
So it sounds like you bet again.
I did bet again, actually. That's good thinking. So I took a sizing of half pot here. I bet 1375.
It's basically setting up for geometric-ish, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the solver is also doing that here. It is also taking a half. It's taking a half pot sizing. Yeah. So that I got right at least. I got the sizing right. So.
Yep. And of course, to any of our newer viewers, we talk about it quite often. But if you haven't heard before, geometric sizing, betting basically the same percentage of the pot on the turn in the river to get all the money in by the river. Sometimes people talk about geometric sizing on the flop as well, but I don't know that we ever really apply that.
Yeah, it is interesting. I saw an interesting X post about that recently, where I was like, huh. But but it's funny. I heard Doug Polk in a recent video, instead of saying geometric sizing, he just said geo, and I'm like, poker lingo is so hard and like
arcane.
Already, like you can't do that, man. You just can't.
So you take a geo-ter size.
Yeah.
Okay, and what happens?
Villain calls.
Oh boy. All right.
The river is the 9 of clubs.
Okay.
So the question is, do we go for it?
Well, again, I think this river kind of makes it even more clear that, like, on a river like this, our opponent's going to be even more incentivized, even if they did stick around for 2 streets with, like, a middling pocket pair, like 8s through 5s. You know, they're probably going to have to fold here because some portion of our bluffs probably have a 9 in them. Mm-hmm. So I'm probably just want to cut our losses here and check.
Okay. I actually did check. So
okay.
I agree with you. I think that I really wasn't sure in game. I was like, man, I feel like he can just have a lot of overpairs here as played, and his hand's bad. So
yeah.
I wasn't sure because I didn't think in game that I really had those sort of suited broadways that continue for 2 streets without picking up a backdoor. I wasn't thinking those hands would be in my range. And I was thinking that I would have some busted straight draws in my range, which of course, busted draws are always, not always, but often the hands you want to give up on the river with. So I thought, hey, maybe this is supposed to be a hand I shove with, but I did not. I gave up, waved the right flag. And it is interesting to see the solver does indeed give up its busted straight draws, but it's just ripping it with those suited Broadway, air balls. So.
Cool.
Anyway, villain goes ahead and rips it on us. So we
Did you ever find out what he had?
No, I tried to, but I could not. But,
yeah, and I think it's an interesting distinction where I think a hand, like suited connectors, I feel like work really well as bluffs on boards where like you have some sort of like gut shot straight draw. And like with a flush draw there, and when the flush draw bricks, it's just a great triple barrel because a hand like 6-7 is of course going to lose to all your opponents like Ace X and King X of a suit, but will get those hands to fold on the river. But here, when there aren't really any of those hands, you wouldn't expect villain to have stuck around really with any Ace High, King High type hands. Like it's unlikely that like we check, he checks back, and we lose to some like random terrible high card hand like it might be otherwise.
Exactly. Like on this board, like are they finding those continues with Ace Jack or whatever? Like maybe they're supposed to. I don't know, but they're probably not. So.
Yeah. Okay. Well, interesting hand. I think you saved yourself $22.
I did.
So nice job.
$32.
Oh, $32.
Yeah.
Perfect. Even
really
better.
Big save here. Yeah. But anyway. So I said that was the hand I played bad. So the other one later on will be worse. But we can move along here to your first hand.
Well, I've got 2 interesting hands that I think both come down to river decisions, which are always fun. And these are both going to be 1-3 Encore Boston Harbor, best room in the world, as we know. Okay, so let me just input some stuff real quick. 1-3, the effective stack is going to be 250. So playing reasonably short here, especially given sort of the typical open sizings. And speaking of typical open sizings, Hero is in UTG +1. So Encore Boston is, of course, a 9-handed game. So this is true UTG +1. And I open Ace of Clubs, Queen of Spades to 15.
Okay.
I've been experimenting a little bit with changing open sizes based on position in live games, because I do think that's something that like people have been trying to do more in like solver world and online and stuff. But I don't know that it's so. Maybe it's appropriate to go like 10 from early position and like up to 15 as you get later.
I would say in a live game, I don't like that. Because you're just going to get a million callers. If you open small and early position, like people will just overcall so much and you're going to hate life. So I actually don't. I think that in solver world or in an online game where people kind of aren't doing a lot of flatting or maybe a bigger live game, I don't know, where there's less field flatting going on, maybe that's fine. Certainly in a tournament. But I think in a live low stakes cash game, you're just asking to have a terrible time. So.
Yeah, that's fair. So anyway, I do go 15 here. The low jack calls, the cutoff calls, and the big blind calls. So we got a million overcallers anyway.
Well, how many ways are we?
4 ways.
4 ways. Okay, so 60 in the middle, and we're effective at.
We had 250 to start, so we got about 235 now. So roughly 4-to-1 stack to pot ratio. And the flop rolls off pretty favorable. Ace of diamonds, 9 of spades, 8 of clubs. So ace, 9, 8 rainbow. We've got ace, queen offsuit. And the big blind checks. And how do you feel about c-betting versus checking here?
Well, we're going to have the best hand a lot. There are a good number of draws, not a ton. There are a decent number out there. I think that this is the sort of board where live villains will do a decent amount of checking back even with ace X, so into 3 other opponents. So I think I do like to bet here to get value. Maybe in theory this is supposed to be checked sometimes for like balance and such, but I think that versus kind of the typical live people, I would bet this, and I probably wouldn't take a huge sizing, maybe $20.
Yeah, I decided to bet 30 because I do think I would take, if I were heads up, I probably would take a larger sizing on this board because it is like pretty connected. There's a lot of hands to get value from. I certainly wouldn't be betting all my hands on this board. So
yeah, I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with that at all.
I bet 30, and the cutoff calls, and I believe the cutoff is the only caller. So we do get it down to heads up with a strong ace, which I'm feeling pretty good about.
Any reads on the cutoff?
He seemed very like normal, like standard live player, like pretty ABC. Did not seem super bluff happy, but it was hard to tell. I think he had sat down pretty recently, but that was just kind of my initial read.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we got 120 now in the middle, 200 behind. Like,
yep.
I'm interested in playing for stacks from the spot. Given the live dynamic, I would say, I mean, it might be like you might want to do some maybe checking on some turns here. In a balanced world to protect your checking range, you may have a good candidate for that because you're unblocking a lot of the straight draws. So maybe you can check and then call a bet. But ultimately, because if you're saying this is an ABC guy, unlikely to bluff a lot, I would plan to play for stacks here, depending on.
Yeah, and I was planning on pretty much barreling, any safe looking turn card. The turn card that comes is I thought was maybe not the safest. It comes the 7 of spades. So the board is now ace, 9, 8, 7. So, I think this is a pretty interesting card for this hand because, it like really, I feel like it improves a lot of villains' hands here. Obviously, like he can have a lot of worse ace X. But I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get stacks in against worse ace X on a board like this. And, he also has a lot of hands that either improve to something like 2 pair or a straight at this point.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, is there a sizing you can take here where if he jams, you can fold?
I think so. I mean, I could probably bet I could just bet like a third pot again or something.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I kind of feel like we can go to get our stacks in here. Like, even though it's kind of thin, I don't know that live players will give you credit for a straight on this board.
Do you think there's any merit to like checking the turn, and if he checks back, then like jam the river?
I don't know. That's interesting. I mean, will he call, like on a brick river, like will he call off with like a worse ace?
Right, kind of assuming that a player like this might check back a worse ace,
Yeah.
a decent amount of the time. Obviously will not be checking back any of his like super strong hands.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely interesting. Like, I think it's sort of not credible, which is maybe a nice thing when you have value.
Right.
But I also think you are potentially. I mean, one of the things about like draw completing cards is they also sometimes will introduce draws, so you have to be mindful of that too. Like maybe if he had something like 10-9, now he's open-ended to go with his pair. So certainly there's something to be said for trying to get value from those hands, which will probably not pay you off on a river jam, but might pay off a small river bet. So maybe you think that he has enough pairs here that you can get some value on the river, whether that's a jam or not. I don't know. Maybe we could talk about that on the river, but just say like, hey, I'm unlikely to get 2 streets of value unless he has specifically an ace, and there isn't that much worse ace X at this point that isn't actually aces up. So
right,
I can get on board with it.
So
I can get on board with the check.
But I don't mind bet folding either. I mean, I don't think I would bet call here like ever.
No, I don't think so.
Like, I think, if he ever rips it, we're just, like, stone dead or, drawing to pretty few outs. So I do decide to check, but I think maybe I like betting kind of like 40, like betting a third, just pretty exploitatively, just to try and extract the value now.
Yeah, I think it's fine, though. Like, I do think it's fine to try to get your value on the river just with this setup. So I kind of like your check. I wouldn't follow you for a bet. I think betting large here is not good because you will pot commit yourself on accident.
And I've done that way too many times over the last few months. So I check, and he does not check it back, though. He bets 50.
Interesting.
Which is a pretty weird sizing.
I mean, yeah, it's not that weird. It's kind of like, it is. You would expect him to take... Well, I don't know. Would you expect him to take a large size, like given this SPR?
Maybe. I don't know that that live players are necessarily thinking about SPR. I've had way too many inner monologues say to myself, like, come on, just stick it in. Like while I'm watching someone count out a bet that like leaves their opponent with like $12 behind.
Yeah. Now, fair enough. Live players often do not think about SPR, but they sometimes do.
So sure. He bets 50. So maybe. I mean, this is like kind of an uncomfortable spot, and I guess it is like it's kind of a good bet sizing for my opponent because like the thing is like I was almost thinking like it's like a spot where I feel like I'm not even gonna be like I'm kind of thinking ahead to the river where if I call this and I check and he jams, like it doesn't really matter what the river is. Like I almost don't want to improve because then I'm gonna have to call it off.
I agree that if you call and then you check and I think you have to check fold river.
Yeah.
I mean, even if he gets you, fine,
Yeah. Well, I think this is kind of a spot where basically, I like, but I guess my question is like, is there any way we can like fold here?
I don't think so.
Right, because if he takes the small sizing, he could just have like a weak ace that he checks back the river, right?
He can have a weak ace. He can have like ace 10 that he thinks is the nuts,
or even 10-9.
Sure, yeah.
7-6, who knows?
Right. So I definitely don't think we can fold here. I think one thing I wonder is like, is there any consideration to jam now? They try to get value from his draws.
I don't know. I just don't like. I don't know. I don't really think. I think it's just like we are just behind so much when he bets that like yes we'll get more value, but like also, he's way more likely to check back like draws or even pairs and draws. So
yeah,
I'm probably happy.
I think if you jam, you will get called by all draws. So
right.
it's sort of just like how often do you think he has a draw?
Right.
So.
I do agree with that, but I basically decide at this point that this is going to be a rare moment where I decide to apply what Bart Hansen likes to call Fifth Street chicken, which I very rarely do. I think that's a concept that I don't really apply much, a live concept, but it's basically like players aren't bluffing enough on the river, so you can like call a turn bet, and then if you're, you can kind of expect it to go check, check. If it ever goes check, check, you win on the river. And if your opponent bets, they're bluffing so infrequently that you can just fold so much.
Yeah.
Of course, I rarely apply that, and I usually wind up calling off the river bets.
Yeah, of course. That's why we have this show.
Yes.
Okay,
exactly.
so you call, and what's the river?
So I call. It's where it comes down to. But I thought it was kind of a weird turn spot where I was almost like I really don't want to see an ace or a queen.
Yeah. Okay.
Because I don't want to have to call it off, which I would have to. So there's like 220 in the pot, and there's like 150 behind. And the river,
do we get an ace or a queen?
And the river is a brick. It's an offsuit deuce.
Okay.
I check, and he jams.
I don't know, man. I think I just fold.
Yeah.
I think it is possible we're getting owned, but there isn't even that many hands that are owning us. Like, what is it? It's like Queen Jack, which we're blocking. That's it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I do actually.
We have a pretty standard fold. Even at equilibrium, I think we have a fold.
Well, I do actually find a fold.
Good job.
And I do manage to get a reveal because I kind of say, oh, I guess your Jack 10 got there, huh? And he turns over Jack 10 offsuit.
Yeah, there you go. So
he did
all right,
indeed.
You saved yourself some money. Good work. Listen up, viewers. We're improving, so take that.
I folded the river with top pair. Bet you'd never see the day.
Yeah, that's a first for us here on Bankroll Burners. Speaking of, if you're proud of Josh for making that fold, please like the video. Maybe he'll make more in the future.
Yeah, please like, comment, subscribe. Keep up your viewership. We appreciate you all. Let us know what you'd like to see from us. And don't just say play better, because that's not going to happen.
Yeah, no way. Okay, so speaking of, I got a hand here, which is another hand from the session one of the sessions you and I played together down here in Jacksonville.
Sorry, so this is the hand you played really badly?
Like real bad.
And
I think I messed up every street, including pre-flop. So.
Oh boy.
So we're going to start this hand with a really important detail. My hand is King of Clubs, Queen of Diamonds. I thought until the end of the hand that my hand was King of Diamonds, Queen of Clubs. So, ladies and gents, check your hand occasionally during the hand. You will see why this is relevant later.
Okay.
So, my hand is King of Clubs, Queen of Diamonds. And we're $295 effective with the main villain in this hand, who seems to be fairly competent it's as competent as a 2-2 player can be.
290?
295. I mean, same thing.
Okay.
We're about 150 picks. And the cap on this game is 300, so it's basically a starting stack. We're in the cutoff with our offsuit Broadway. We make it $10. And the button, who is fairly aggressive, like I said, seems somewhat competent, fairly aggressive, makes it 35.
Okay.
And so I know he can be doing this like lighter than OMC's. I think that this is probably a 4-better fold spot. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think this is just a fold.
You think?
Like most of the time, I think queen offsuit, even at equilibrium, like on like a pre-flop chart, I think this is mostly a fold.
Okay. Well, anyway, I think that's fine. I would probably fold here most of the time.
And 4-betting occasionally with like offsuit Broadways, like can't be that bad.
Yeah, for sure. But anyway, we call. So.
And I've certainly done that many times.
Yeah. So this is just terrible. Don't ever do this.
But like you're not even.
It goes for all the plays we do in this podcast. Don't ever do them. But this is just bad.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
You're not even in position.
I know. It's
like
so
if
bad.
you're in position, I'd be like, yeah, okay, fair enough. Like let's see it flop, but you aren't.
No, this is just trash panda play. So we
get to see.
Go ahead. We go ahead to the flop with 70 in the middle. Heads up. King of Hearts, 7 of Diamonds, 6 of Clubs.
Oh boy, it's a flop that we don't really want to see.
Yeah, I know. It's like I was like, oh, this is why this hand's terrible. So King 7-6 Rainbow. Of course, we're expecting him to bet this flop a lot. we're obviously never leading here. We check, and he does bet 25 into 70, 75. So I think nothing you do here but call with the knowledge that we can be dominated.
Yeah, and I think, if we were deeper, we could consider raising here occasionally against an active player to a small C bet. But I don't think we really want to stack off. We don't really want to stack off here at this depth.
Yeah, I agree. I actually did consider it in game, and that's what I wanted to bring up is like, can we check raise here for protection? And I think if we're, I kind of wonder if we can sometimes. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's fine if you kind of know that this villain is pretty active. Because it's really interesting. Because like a live ABC player, I've seen players who like will not C bet. Don't even know C betting. It's like, oh, they can have queens and they'll check back here. Jacks check back here. So, check raising them is just like torching money, but against a player who is betting this board a lot and has a somewhat active 3-betting range, if you have solid reads that those two things are the case, then I think it's totally fine to put in a small raise here.
Yeah, and I think I should have. Like I said, I don't think I played this hand super well.
But I think calling is. I don't think there's anything wrong with calling. I think of course, I think it's something you are kind of trying to get through my head. Is it's nice to get some have thin value raises in your range because it does kind of make your range a lot sort of more puts a lot more hands in your range and makes you a lot harder to play against.
Absolutely, and I guess the other thing I'll point out here is. We are at we came to the flop with like a little over 3-1 SPR. So it's sort of a question of like, if like it goes brick, if it goes deuce 3, do we want to stack off with this hand? And this is the reason we really hate calling pre with this hand because like it's so blah. But
right, it's probably
perhaps. Close. What do you think? Do you think like if we just go, can we go check call like with this hand?
I feel like we could probably like fold to a river jam. Like if he takes the sizing to like get all the money in, which is like
how does he take a sizing to not get all the money in it anyway? But
yeah, I don't know. It's probably close.
Yeah,
it just feels bad.
No, this is like truly atrocious. So
I honestly feel like our opponent shouldn't really have that many bluffs here. Is the other thing. Like even if he is somewhat active for betting, like. It's a rain. This is going to be a board where it's going to be hard, especially for sort of a live player to find. This would be a board where it would be hard for me to find the right triple barrel bluffs because so much of your 3-betting range either is a pair or is like ace high or has like, it's kind of weird to find the right hands. Like your best triple barrel as a 3-better is probably like 7-8 or something silly like that.
Yeah, I'm trying to think like what are their best triple barrels here. Certainly, we want to block. He would want to block me from having a king, so he probably wants probably ace queen is a good. But triple.
Ace queen is like way too strong to triple barrel.
You think we haven't? I
think with ace queen you have to check back the turn because it just has plenty of value.
Well, I don't know because I don't have that many draws that call flop here though.
Yeah. Well, it's so small you might call with like ace jack with a backdoor.
Sure. I don't know. I'm curious. We should, yeah. Anyway, so I do call. And the turn is pretty interesting. The turn is the 7 of clubs. So we introduce a backdoor flush draw, and we pair the middle card.
Okay.
And I've been implementing a lot of leading on middle card pairs.
Mm-hmm.
And more broadly, I've been trying to implement a lot of leading on turns that I expect my opponent to check back a lot.
Sure.
And in a single raise pot, I think this ticks both of those boxes. But in a 3-bet pot, I think it ticks neither of those boxes.
That's exactly what I was going to say. So I'm glad that you said it before I did. I think that middle card pairing is sort of a textbook example of a good card to lead on as sort of the pre-flop caller and flop caller in a single raise pot, but I don't think that you have enough 7s in your range to justify a lead here. And I don't think this card is going to get checked back a lot because your opponent does still have a lot of like ace king and hands like that, which should not be scared of the 7 and you'd expect to keep betting.
Absolutely, which is why I led for $40 here.
Well, I like your sizing.
Thanks.
The lead should be small.
Yeah, this is just like, again, total terror bad play by me. I was thinking of it. I was sort of thinking we were in a single raise spot here. Of course, we were not. You'd think having king queen off out of position, surely it must be a single raise spot.
Hey, fair enough.
And villain actually really thinks hard on my lead here before eventually deciding to call.
Villain call. Okay. So basically, there's a pot-sized bet on the river at this point, right? There's around 200 in the pot and then just under 200 behind. Okay.
Now, the river, yeah, so we can all agree that that's just really poor turn play. But so the river is the 2 of clubs, so we do bring in the backdoor flush draw, but do not complete any straight draws.
So final board, king 7, 6, 7 deuce, backdoor club draw came in, and hero has king queen with the king of clubs, not the queen of clubs.
But hero does think that we have the queen of clubs.
Okay.
I think this is pretty much a check, always. I guess if we made a flush here, we probably bet. I guess we would bet a flush here. Yeah. So.
Yeah. If we had if we had like pocket sixes or something, we could probably bet here also.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, but of course we really shouldn't be in this spot. But all right, we do check with our specific holding, and villain tanks for a while and jams.
Okay.
So in game, my first question to myself was, would he play ace king this way? And what do you think?
I think he should.
I agree, absolutely. Ace king should be jammed here. But would a typical live player do this? Even a atypical live player? How common is it that someone plays ace king this way?
Well, he 3-bet pre-flop, so somewhat uncommon.
Dear Lord.
No, I mean, in all seriousness, I think that players do play ace king this way a reasonable amount of the time. Especially if he's got the ace of clubs. I think that most live players will find this jam. Even without the ace of clubs, I think a good amount of the time, like, it's almost like people when they hit with ace king can definitely go too aggressively. They can go 2 balls to the wall. You know what I mean? Like, I've seen people get ace king and totally miss and just barrel like there's no tomorrow and just stick all their money in because they decide it's super strong. So I wouldn't be surprised for him to have ace king. He can obviously have aces here as well.
I kind of thought he was not very likely to have aces, just given that he just called on the turn.
I mean, it's interesting, right? If he's somewhat of a thinking player, I think, and again, we were kind of talking about last hand about our live villains thinking about the SPR. And that's, I think, relevant here where, villain could realize, there's 200 in the pot. I'm going to just call here. And again, especially if he has like the ace of clubs, like that's kind of a lot of the hands that he wants to get called by, right? As if he jams, he wants to get called by like your club draws with the ace of clubs. So again, I think that he definitely can have aces. Again, more weighted towards the ace of clubs, but I think he can have both. So yeah, I don't know. I think this is a really awful spot.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of thought for bluffs, he can have like ace queen with the ace of clubs, ace jack with the ace of clubs. Those are going to be the primary bluffs.
Yeah. He might fold those on the turn.
Possible.
Because like those hands really have very little equity on the turn unless his plan was to jam a club river when checked to. Mm-hmm. Which is, I think, an ambitious hope.
I'm trying to think if I would call. I would probably call at least with ace queen with the ace of clubs and to that turn lead. But yeah.
Yeah, it's so weird because like then like I feel like when you face a turn, like if I faced a turn lead from a standard live player, I would expect a river jam a reasonable percentage of the time.
Interesting. I wouldn't necessarily. I do see people just kind of doing this stuff on the turn a lot, just kind of feeling it out.
I feel like I rarely see turn leads, to be honest.
I don't know.
Okay, well this is I feel like we've put ourselves in a pretty crappy spot.
And I also, let's say we had the queen of clubs.
Okay.
Do we think this is a call? I think personally, without the queen of clubs, I think this is just a fold. But if we do have the queen of clubs, do you think this is a call?
I mean, we have the king of clubs though.
But is that relevant?
I think so. Why is it not relevant?
I mean, does villain play like ace king of clubs this way? I guess
Sure.
maybe. All right.
I think
I
having
guess
a king, because it's not like our opponent has ever, kind of taken the steps to turn their hand into a bluff where we would expect them to do with the queen of clubs and not with the king of clubs, right?
okay, fair
That's
enough.
like my thought. It's like it's not like he just started going haywire on any street. He like c-bet the flop, which I think he could do with like really any king. Just called your turn bet, which again, even if he had king jack of clubs, king queen of clubs, I think he would play the same way and then jam river. So I think what club, unless you think he's turning like ace queen with a queen of clubs into a bluff, which
probably
seems
not.
ambitious.
Yeah, I guess my thought was like that he would. A lot of live players would jam ace king of clubs on the turn because they think it's the nuts.
I mean, it kind of it is.
Yeah.
It is. I mean, all ace king is basically the nuts on the turn. To be fair.
Yeah, but I guess so. I guess I just didn't really think that he would play it that way. But maybe you're right.
I have
Maybe
a question. What were you gonna do on the turn if villain jammed?
Full.
Okay. Good.
Yeah, full.
Okay.
I mean, I just don't really know like what bluffs there are besides specifically like ace queen with the ace of clubs. But
Well,
I
on
think
the
that's
turn,
kind
he
of.
could
I
have,
don't
like,
really
ace-
see him doing that though. That's kind of weird.
Well, on the turn, he could actually have a hand like ace queen of clubs
That he just jams.
as a flush,
Yeah.
like a flush draw, and then I think having the queen of clubs is relevant. But I mean, it would be a pot-sized jam anyway, so we don't need to defend all that much.
No, I think I would just fold if he jammed.
Okay, well, this is a weird. I mean, I don't know. I think having a club, it's not that bad. So it just depends on what you think this villain is capable of jamming for value. Honestly.
Yeah, and that's what I did. I thought outside. I decided that I didn't think they were jamming ace king without the ace of clubs.
Okay.
But I thought maybe there's there's how many? It was 8 combos of ace king left, and I kind of thought, okay, there's one combo of pocket kings, obviously.
Oh, but you think he's only jamming ace king with the ace of clubs?
Yes.
Which is 2 combos.
Yes. Sorry, I'm saying. Yeah. So yes, I think he's only jamming with the ace of clubs. So 2 combos there. A combo of kings, and then a few flushes are possible.
What about aces with the club? You don't really think he has that?
I think he probably does. In game, I kind of had discounted it because I just thought he was going to jam most aces on the turn. But I think you make a good point that some players might not. So maybe he has some aces here too. But I mean, I think he has like a good number. I think there's some ace queen with a club, with ace of clubs, ace jack with ace of clubs type hands, if he is floating those.
Okay. Well, I think I'd probably fold.
I agree. I think I should fold. That's probably right. So
you
I
called?
called. Yeah.
And he had?
Ace 8 of clubs.
Oh.
For the backdoor.
What a sick c-bet on the flop.
I know.
Double backdoor.
Pretty good. Yeah, definitely atrociously played on all streets by me. So
really interesting hands.
Really interesting hand. What is wrong with you? All right, take us home.
All right. Well, we've got another fun river decision from me. This is a nice loose pre-flop play from me. And I was playing so disciplined this session pre-flop, except for this hand. So we're just a nice little.
That seems legit.
Nice little disclaimer. We're playing 400 effective. There is a straddle on in this hand. The straddle's been on and off. This table was mediocre. The main villain of this hand, I will say, was a guy who had already gotten caught bluffing twice in like the half hour I was there. I couldn't tell if he was like a decent player. He was doing a fair amount of limping, so not that decent. But, he definitely was willing to put his money in. So, okay. With that said, there is one... Wow, this is really bad. This player in middle position limps. Heroes in the small blind with Jack 8 of diamonds and over limps.
That seems
I think
fine.
It's pretty loose. but
I don't know. I mean, well, wait, there's one limper?
yeah.
Okay, well, yeah, no, I don't like it. I think you can raise this hand.
Oh, I would not raise. I'd rather fold than raise. Out of the small blind.
You think?
Yeah, with a straddle on too, I think we're kind of pretty shallow. I don't think I'd want to raise this hand.
Okay.
I'd probably rather muck. If I was on the button, I might raise this hand.
Yeah, fair enough.
Or if there was a limp and it was an unstraddled pot and there was only one player behind me plus the limper, I'd probably be more willing to raise.
Yeah, I would think that's pretty nitty to fold this if it was like a one, just straight 1-3.
Yeah. I don't know. Limpers kind of throw everything off.
Maybe, but you can also put a lot of pressure on them. So.
That's true. Well, I decided to limp here. I don't really like it, but I don't think it's that atrocious. The two players behind me were like not really not very active, so I didn't really expect to get raised out of the pot, but you know.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're not here to play pre-flop police, but certainly this is better than just calling a 3-bet out of position with king queen offsuit. So,
but I mean, I could call a 3-bet out of position with jack 8. You don't know.
It's true. All right, so what happens?
Call. No, so the big blind limps and the straddle checks. So we get away cheaply. So I don't know. It's a kind of
we get away cheaply, and that's why we're talking about this hand, I'm sure.
So we've got jack 8 of diamonds. The flop comes down very connected. It is 9-7-5 rainbow, 9 of clubs, 7 of diamonds, 5 of hearts.
So we've got a gutter.
We flop ourselves a double gutter.
Double gutter.
And I decide to lead here with my double gutter. I think I've been trying to do a little bit more betting in limped pots, and I think it's good to have some bluffs, and this is a pretty darn good one, I think.
Agree. I like betting out in limped pots a lot. So.
What kind of sizing do you typically use? Do you think that I should just pot it like 25, or do you think because it's a straddle pot we should go a little smaller?
I think you could go like 15.
Oh, that's what I do.
All right.
I bet 15. And the big blind and the middle position player both call.
Okay, I don't love that, but could be some interesting turns. I mean, we can certainly be up against 2 other draws here. It's certainly possible. So.
Yeah, I mean, most draws are probably going to be paired up as part of it. Like, we could be up against, 10-8 and, 6-4. Like, it's certainly not out of the question.
Yeah.
But we could also be up against, 5-6 and 7-6 and 7-8 and all those wonderful hands.
Which are hands you can get to fold on some rivers. So.
And the turn is going to come a pretty interesting one for our hand. It's the Jack of Spades. So it completes the rainbow and gives us top pair.
But, of course, it brings in 10-8.
It does bring in the aforementioned 10-8, and of course it does complete some 2 pairs. If we've got people in here with Jack 8 suited, we've got people in here with all sorts of hands.
I mean, I'm betting this card.
Yeah, I agree. I'm like, wow, this is so good. Like, I'd be repping this card a lot with, my bluffs. If I had because I think that people who defend, and this is this is something that's, I really try to implement a lot, is especially in live poker when people aren't defending with the frequencies they should. Overcards are going to improve their range so much less than the betters, that this is just a card you can just bet quite a lot.
Less so because it's a limped pot, but yeah.
Yeah, but even so, I don't think people really have a lot of Jack X here that they're.
I don't think you do either. I guess is sort of.
No, I agree, but I think that they're still going to overfold because a player with a 9 or a 7, you can just bluff the Jack so much because they're going to fold eventually.
Okay, yeah, I would definitely bet this card for value. So what kind of sizing did you take?
So I bet 30, which was right around half pot given the rake, a little under. Rakeless.
Okay, yeah. Seems fine. I might go bigger because there's still a lot of draws out there to call you and will call you for a bigger sizing. So
yeah, of course it's still multi-way, so I'm always a little caught in how to play those multi-way turn spots. But I think I definitely could have gone a little bit bigger.
Look, I mean, if you're crushed, they're probably going to raise you anyway, so you can just fold.
That's true. That's definitely a good point. I mean, yeah, if we get raised, we're definitely going to fold.
Although, even it depends on the size of the raise, I guess, because we may have enough equity to try and call, but
Well, the big blind folds and the middle position player is the only caller.
Okay. And the middle position player called next to act
No,
No,
he called
last act.
he
Okay,
called
cool. So
last
that,
act.
his range is a little less strong.
So he overcalled. So that was me, the big blind, the straddle in the middle position limper. And so he had overcalled with one caller already in there, and now he's calling after a fold.
Yeah, I mean, he can absolutely have a 9 here a lot. 9 plus straight draw type hand.
So the river is another weird card that changes the dynamic quite a bit. It's the Ace of Hearts.
So it doesn't bring in any draws.
No, well, so the board was rainbow, so there was no flush draw to bring in, but it does not bring in any of the various straight draws.
Why do you? I kind of think this is a brick. Why don't you?
Well, I think it's hard to get value on this card. With my jack, I think it's hard to get worse hands to call on this card. Like, I don't know that I'm going to get called by a 9, or certainly not a 7 at this point.
Okay. But I don't really know, like, what are you going to check call here?
I mean, maybe. Can we check call?
Maybe to a small bet. But, like, if he takes, like, a sizable bet here, how often are we good? I mean, what is he doing this with? Like, 8? I mean, like, I don't know, 6-4?
Right, like is he ever turning pairs into bluffs? Like, it's hard to say. Like, again, this villain is someone who had bluffed a couple times and had pretty much.
I guess with your read on the villain, but did you see him turn a pair into a bluff?
I don't think so.
I mean, I don't know. I just don't. I see it so rarely, I guess.
But it's like, what are we getting called by if we bet? Like, are we getting it called by like 10-9? Like, are we just gonna bet like 30 again?
You could.
Like, should we just block the river?
We could block the river maybe for 40. Yeah, you could block bet here.
That's actually a good idea. I didn't really think about blocking because it's definitely not something I think about all that much. But I think that it's definitely a good tool to have in the arsenal.
I think we can block folds here because, I mean, if we block, we might get called by a 7. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think blocking is really interesting. It's just something that didn't even cross my mind in game. So I was like, oh, if I kind of want to bet, like, reasonable, like, I don't really want to bet here because I'd have to take, I feel like I'd want to take a somewhat larger sizing. But I don't think I have to.
Yeah, I guess the thing I would say is, like blocking, we were having a conversation about this the other day, but, like, sometimes you can really blocking feels like you're getting away with something because, like, you can get called really light for these small bet sizings. And the other thing is, like, you get a great price on your bluff. Like, what if you whiffed here? Maybe you can just go 40 and just fold out, some stuff, because of this ace card. So, like, I think it actually puts your opponent in a pretty tricky spot if you block. Whereas if you go large, yeah, it's easy for them to fold or snap you off. But, like, if you go small here, I really do think it puts your opponent in a spot more so than a large bet because they're like, ugh,
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense, honestly. But I decided to check in game. I mean, I definitely think it's either, like, I think blocking is probably better, like block folding. I mean, of course, if we get raised, we have to fold, and that's never ideal against a bluffy player. But it's what happens when you block. So
I wouldn't be upset about it. I don't know. Like, if we block and get raised here, like, okay,
Yeah. And he does wind up betting. He bets 60.
So half pot.
Yeah.
Now he's putting you in a spot. I mean, I don't know. I don't really think we can fold to this sizing, unfortunately, because, like, I don't think he would take this sizing with a straight.
Right.
I think he would bet larger.
Or what about, like, 2 pair? Do you think he ever rivers aces up and takes the sizing?
Yeah, I do. I think this is probably a reasonable sizing but, like, you have a fine bluff catcher, I guess. Like, not the best maybe, but I mean, so how often do you have to be right here? I mean, you have to be right here 25% of the time, like, for this to be profitable. Like, I feel like he can be bluffing here 25% of the time. If he had taken a large sizing, I think it's pretty hard for you to call. But yeah, I think we can just call here. I think we're going to lose a decent amount to sort of aces up type hands.
Yeah.
But
And I guess, I've been thinking about spots like this because I feel like I do call here like a lot and like have on this podcast many times and like lose fairly often. But I think like, people often say like, oh, rivers are so like never bluffed, rivers are never bluffed, blah, blah, blah. But, I don't really find that to be the case. And I guess what drives me to make these calls a lot is like, I think what I've kind of settled on is people just don't go thin for value. Like so much of the live population is checking back an ace here.
Right.
And like when they do that, their range suddenly becomes like so bluff heavy. Even if they don't bluff a lot, like they just don't have that, like you can never have that much thick value.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that's, like,
I don't really know
my,
what
like,
naked aces villain ends up here with though as a counterpoint. Like,
yeah, I mean, sure. Like maybe
so,
he has ace 8 or something that he's just stuck here with. Right. Fair enough.
But I do see what you're saying. Like there's a decent number of whiffs here.
Or like King Jack. Like it would not be crazy for my opponent to go for value with King Jack here. Like a competent player, you could probably go for value.
Should be. You're saying they should be. I thought you were saying you think he is.
No. And this is kind of my point.
Then.
Is like why I'm inclined to make calls like this. Because I just never think my opponent, like any of my live opponents, are going for value with King Jack in a spot like this. And so that just makes their range like so polarized in a spot where they're taking a small sizing, and there just aren't that enough like strong hands for me to want to fold.
Yeah, I do think that like, he might just call with 2-pair on the turn sometimes.
Yeah.
Also.
Yeah.
But I think this is a fine call. I really do. I don't think you have to be right very often. So.
Yeah. Well, I just finally, realized why I make calls like this. Because it's like, so, and sometimes people are just at the top of their range, and that's okay too. But I do call, and this is not one of those times. He says you're good and flips over Queen 10 offsuit.
All right. Nice. Pick one off. Yeah, I like it. Do you agree that you would fold to a larger sizing here?
I mean, I don't know, like what better, like what hands do we have to call with? Like having an 8 in our hand is really nice for him taking a larger sizing because it blocks all the straights. And I don't think we have that much ace X that we just started barreling with on the flop either. Yeah,
we can have quite a bit of 2-pair though, I think.
Yeah, I guess ace 9 and maybe some ace 7.
Well, I also think we can have 9-7. I mean, we freaking limped pre. We can have 9-7, Jack 7, Jack 9.
But maybe if he takes a large sizing, is 9-7 even better to have? Like if he takes a lot, I mean, I feel like
because we're not blocking a straight. You mean?
Yeah, I feel like I mean I don't know, man. I don't really know, but I know you kind of implied earlier that you think villain's mostly going to take a large sizing with like straight type hands.
So maybe fair enough. Maybe we actually have a great call candidate regardless. So fair enough.
I mean, I don't really know. I feel like I would definitely be really disgusted if he had bet like 120 here.
Yeah, it sucks. But yeah, you might just be at like the top, quote unquote, the top of your range. So,
and I feel like that's kind of an important thing to do too. Is like actually realize if the villain has shown a tendency to bluff and you are in the top X% and you have to defend, and like really is awful.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, nicely done. We have one hand today on today's podcast that was a victory for Hero, so that's good.
Hey, you know what? When you're playing 9-handed, you should only win a 9th of the time.
Yeah. Sounds true and mathematical. All right, everyone. You've spent another hour with us. We really appreciate it as always. We'd love for you to leave a comment. We'd love for you to subscribe. And we'd love for you to just hang around and watch the next week's video.
Yeah, and we'll keep on punting.
Bye, everyone.